Great. So yeah, it's really, really good to not quite see you all. Hopefully we'll see you at the end. But it's really, thank you so much for coming. We really appreciate you taking time out of your days to come and hear what we've been up to over the last while. And Imogen, I think you're going to kick us off, aren't you?
I am, yeah. I actually really can't see anyone because I've just got the slides up. So hopefully you can all hear and see this okay. Yep.
Yep, I think
Yep.
so.
Okay, great. Fab. Yeah, and just to echo what Alison has said, it's really great to see so many of you here. And I know this is being recorded, so those of you in the future who will watch this, we're going to be delivering the second lecture today. I know you spoke to some of our colleagues last week to talk about adaptation and resilience and lots of different sort of case studies around that. But yeah, Alison and I today will be talking a little bit more about culture-based solutions and culture-based climate action more broadly, and sort of situating that in a more policy context, and looking at how we can build culture into climate policy. So I think this is where we're here, and you've got the climate, nature, and justice session still to come, and that's the two of us. So I'm sure a lot of you already know about JB, but just in case you don't, Alison's going to give a quick overview of who we are and what we do.
Thanks, Imogen. I know that some of you do because I've known some of you for quite a long time. But for those of you who don't, and for those of you who want to refresh, we are a not-for-profit. We were founded in 2007, initially by the UK music industry. Then that very quickly opened out to arts and culture in the round, and it very quickly became international. So we've always worked across culture, and we've always worked internationally. And our mission is really to continue to unite culture, creativity with climate action to drive change. And we'll talk a little bit about where the really damaging gaps have been around bringing these three key themes together a little bit later. But for those of you who don't know us, that's who we are. That's our mission. There's about 25 of us. And if you're not sure who we are, go to the website. You'll find lots of information there, but do get in touch with us later if you'd like to know more. And I'm going to leave it at that.
Great, thanks, Alison. So this is a little bit what we'll be talking about today, looking at culture-based solutions. So what do we mean by culture-based solutions? What can culture do for climate action? As I've said earlier, looking at some of the policy opportunities, kind of taking a look at the whole spectrum from slightly more local approaches to international policy, and we will look obviously with COP30 coming up in Brazil, not long way now, it's 5 weeks, looking at how culture-based solutions are showing up there and some of the work that we're doing before then and after around the really exciting We Make Tomorrow campaign, and then hopefully we'll have some time at the end for some Q&A or just to hear from you and your thoughts on what we talk about. So kicking off with culture-based solutions, obviously when we talk about culture and climate, it's usually from probably one of two angles. It's maybe climate for culture, so looking at, or within culture, so looking at how the culture and arts sector can shift to more sustainable practices or decarbonize, or it might be culture for climate, so looking at how culture and the arts can contribute to climate action. Obviously both really important, and I know that a lot of you on the call will be involved in both of these, maybe to differing degrees. And on the former, looking at sort of how to improve sustainability within the arts, there's obviously loads to talk about. It could be from kind of decarbonisation efforts to shifting to a more kind of circular economy approach. There are so many ways to do this, and obviously arts sector sort of operates within a much broader sort of industrial base. So, you know, we could be talking about travel or buildings or events from sort of different kind of emissions scope reporting. That's obviously really important, and we do a lot of work, as I'm sure you know, obviously at JB, looking at how to support cultural organisations on these journeys, and we've got plenty of resources to help organisations to do this. We're not going to be talking about that today, so I just wanted to acknowledge it now, obviously as an important sort of policy area. We're going to be talking a little bit more about sort of culture for climate and how we can use culture and the arts and everything that you know they offer to really shift international, national, local climate action. At the moment, as we'll sort of talk a little bit about later, a lot of the solutions that we've seen might be more technology focused or looking at sort of far more sort of engineered approaches to climate, and we want to sort of zoom out from that and look at more sort of culturally grounded climate action and what this can offer, and really trying to sort of anchor climate action in the sort of life and people that comes with the arts. So we'll talk a little bit more about sort of what we mean by culture, what we mean by culture-based solutions, and then yeah, go from there. I think Alison's going to kick us off. Oh. Alison, are you there?
Sorry, forgot my mic. You'd have thought I'd learned by now. So very quickly, just a quick explanation of what we mean when we talk about culture, particularly in the policy context. So when I talk about culture-based solutions to climate, I'm talking very specifically about these three dimensions of the cultural sector that's understood as a cultural sector by policymakers, by our national arts funding bodies, by our cities, by the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, and so on. Of course, culture means something much bigger, and we're very comfortable with the blurring between culture as a political construct, as a political sector, and culture as it meets bigger, wider societal ways of experiencing the world that you get through food and you get through farming and so on. But just for the purposes of policy, we mean three areas. One is the arts. The arts are those experiences as human beings that we have to experience the world through our senses, through our full senses. That somatic learning, which is so difficult to pin down and to create concrete material meaning around. And as a result, the arts have just, as we all know, I'm sure in this call, the arts have been seriously and profoundly neglected as vectors of climate solutions, as stewards of feelings, as sense makers, as storytellers, as all of these kind of critical areas of which are hard, real expressions of climate action, and without which we are really limiting and constraining our capacity to act. The second area is, of course, cultural heritage, which is much easier to understand in the context of climate. It's those sites, it's those places, and it's those practices that are holding together many ancient knowledge systems and cosmologies, indigenous values, and continue to be practiced and are increasingly being understood as the kind of knowledge that we need in order to protect and preserve, but also in order to transform. What does it mean to have an entire cultural system and heritage based on a deep connection with the natural world and understanding the rhythms and the laws of nature in a very different way? Absolutely fundamental. And and it's where many of our deep values, our existential values, sit across cultural heritage. And the third area is, of course, the creative industries. These are often overlooked because they're often associated with the economy, which is really important, particularly for emerging economies, how they might shape their economies around their creative offerings is really, really important. It's a climate justice issue because globally, over recent years, our creative industries have really focused on global north industries, which means that the narratives, it means the products, and it means the behaviors around consumerism have been really led by a very extractive industrial ideology. What would it look like were our creative industries fair, equitable, and embedded in sustainable and regenerative practice? So these three areas, which together create this incredible opportunity to transform what we know through our bodies, through our communities and our connections, through our relationships, as well as through the experiences that we offer, are as fundamental in my view as it gets. They're as fundamental, and yet what we've been finding for some years now is that they are really not understood to be offering the potential that they offer, and neither are the existing practices, particularly around cultural heritage, being protected, nor the opportunities for investment into clean, green economies being made through the creative industries. Next one, please.
Thanks, Alison. So yeah, we've just included this here, talking about nature-based solutions. This is largely around sort of how we're using the term culture-based solutions, which obviously is a phrase to try and sort of encompass the what culture and the arts can offer, as Alison's just sort of outlined, to this policy audience. And obviously, nature-based solutions is the idea that we can use nature as to sort of solve maybe like more traditionally climate issues and biodiversity loss. And sort of fundamental to this is that by investing in the restoration or protection of natural ecosystems, that you get lots of benefits. It might be climate mitigation or flood reduction and sort of protecting communities in that way. These are some of the definitions on the screen here that have been offered, by international organisations like IUCN and the Nature-Based Solutions Initiative. Over the years, they've been adopted into international sort of climate talks, far more, and sort of been accepted as this sort of route. So I think the way that we were thinking about culture-based solutions was how to kind of possibly follow this route and also offer something that's not nature-based solutions, because as I'm sure many of you know, and as it's kind of touched on in that the second definition on the screen here, is that they're also quite a problematic sort of concept in many ways. A lot of the projects that are meant to offer these positive solutions can really just exclude people, actually, and culture from projects. They often have resulted in huge land grabs, for example, to sell carbon credits, and just really continue a lot of colonial practices, actually, in many ways, and land grabs and privatization of nature, and sort of fundamentally ignores a lot of the roots of these problems. So really just wanted to kind of acknowledge that some of the terms that we use aren't perfect, and also that nature-based solutions, in this way, isn't one of the only things that we can offer, as opposed to maybe more traditional climate solutions. Having said that, we also want to acknowledge that when we're talking about culture-based solutions, that there is a real risk that this can be sort of co-opted, or that it's presented as something that's entirely new, when obviously a lot of the cultural or sort of culture-based solutions that we're talking about are things that have been carried out by communities for hundreds of years, and that that we sort of really need to sort of protect that and acknowledge that, that when we're sort of using this term. Also here, so what we're just talking about with this sort of slight shift away from maybe the idea of culture or using culture or as part of climate action from this slightly more narrow focus maybe that we've had in the past of sort of the avoidance of bad. So it's, you know, how does the culture and creative industries sort of reduce their environmental impacts, which is obviously essential, but we want to take that in a more positive direction and actually think about what good can these sectors do, thinking about sort of facilitating this shift to a far more sort of regenerative future and thinking about sort of positive impacts, and sort of this evolving space where we can allow room for imperfections, but use the kind of energy and creativity within these sectors to sort of imagine a new world or a new future to live in. So sort of from on a similar angle, this kind of shift away from consumption and individual, fast, extractive, linear, unfair, to something that's far more rooted in care and values around the collective and regenerative, circular, just, thinking about sort of humans within a much broader ecosystem, and relating to each other and the natural world. So this is just, yeah, hopefully trying to visualize some of the shift in values, and yeah, what we value, as Alison's just set out. So, having said all of that, how does culture currently show up in climate policy and approaches to climate action? We're just going to dig into some examples now. So as this is just sort of outlining what we've already touched upon, at the moment, culture or climate approaches are often sort of really siloed into sort of, or separated into policy silos. They might tackle lots of different areas, and there's not so much of a kind of broad overview. There's lots of, as I've said, sort of technological solutions, focus on science, which is obviously important, but that kind of more holistic vision is maybe lost. Culture at the moment is absent from the Paris Agreement in national climate plans, such as nationally determined contributions, which we'll get onto a little bit later, and just isn't supported as a proper sort of tool really for climate action. You know, you might see it at international climate talks, but often it would just be a side event and as a sort of decorative, optional, nice to have, rather than really being taken seriously. And being taken seriously both for what it can offer, but also because we're at risk of losing a lot of our cultural heritage through the climate crisis. So it's not all bad, and there are some examples of climate policy that is starting to incorporate more cultural considerations, which I think Alison's just going to go through now.
Thank you, Imogen. Yes, so we've just pulled up a few things. We've brought in the UK's government for the national, and I'll explain why we've brought this in, because it's a really good example, both of progress, but also of how we can undermine that progress in the same breath. So we are seeing culture increasingly in climate policy. I think of all the things that I want to point out, it's the World Cities Culture Forum, which is a group of cities, and they're all big cities. There's about 60 of them, and they are starting to really think much more deeply about culture and climate policy from the city, from the angle of the city. And as many of you will appreciate, so much stretch leadership comes from cities rather than from national governments. Very often we see cities doing the experimentation, just as festivals do for the arts. We often see cities doing experimentation, going further and much more ambitiously and much faster than national governments. which creates the enabling factor for national governments to then follow. So in a way, that's the wrong way round. What we've got is we've got some really stretch things beginning to happen locally, both at the city and the community level. This will not be a surprise to many of you in this call, because actually the real stretch comes from the ground. The real work is already happening on the ground. Actually valorizing this into bigger systems and bigger processes and frameworks is the job in hand. And we've got the beginnings of some real leadership there. So there's the World Cities Culture Forum. They're about to produce another report on progress on climate action, as well as the difficulties that we still have, which are really around the relationship between officials of culture and officials of climate in cities, and that conversation that still isn't happening. We've got increasing national ambition. Now, the UK has got a new industrial strategy. The startling thing about that strategy is that it has put as an absolute top priority, it's put creative industries. Alongside creative industries, as one of the very few priorities, is decarbonisation. These are great, but they're not speaking to each other. So you see this siloing that Imogen already mentioned that we have, and this is just our own, this is the UK where Julie's Bicycle is based, but we see it all over the world, that we have two different policy frameworks, different policy conversations, different policy priorities around culture and around climate that might focus, for example, in culture on rights or inclusion, but we're not seeing those concepts being taken through into climate. And of course, international, we've got various indicators that would support culture, the loss and damage framework, which we'll talk about in a bit, and also adaptation. But again, there's much, much more read across that is needed, much more integration of cultural policy as a full, rich offering to climate solutions. Next, please, Imogen.
Thanks, Alison. And yeah, this is why we've also now called this culture and climate policy. So we're not sort of saying culture and climate policy, it's looking at a far more integrated approach. And this slide is basically just to demonstrate some of the opportunities really to start including more of culture in various sort of international, national and local level policies. So from some of the things that we'll go into now, UNFCCC processes around global stocktake, national adaptation plans, NDCs, sort of, and then right down to maybe more policy around sort of buildings and public engagement, or sort of specific policies around arts funding, for example. So yeah, just wanted to highlight sort of the range of opportunities there are there really. And now we're going to go a bit more into some of the specific policies, I guess. And
we'll hurry up a bit because I've just looked at the time, and so I think we should turbocharge ourselves a bit, Imogen, actually, because we won't get to the meat of it. Shall I take this one?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. So just very quickly, and I will speed up so that you've got lots of time to ask questions. The Paris Climate Agreement, we all know that is based on the idea of a full multilateral agreement to commit to reducing our greenhouse gas emissions. The underpinning framework is something called the Global Stocktake, where every 5 years or so, all the countries come together, they submit what they have achieved, and they recommit to new ambitions. And we've just been through the very first global stocktake. I will leave you with the slide so you can have a look at the detail, but I'll just keep to the general now. The global stocktake that took place and was ratified at last year's COP 29, showed that we were very far off where we need to be. This will not be a surprise to you. And so we now go into a second round of global stocktake, where we recommit to greater ambition and faster, and that the final process for that is complete by 2030. Next, please, Imogen. it's not, these are underpinned by what are called, and sorry about the jargon if you're not used to it, nationally determined contributions. This basically is the submission for each national government to say, we're going to give you this. Our contribution is going to be this kind of reduction in this kind of a timescale. And they're all voluntary and they're all different, with the global north needing to be more ambitious to enable the global south and to be able to invest in their economies so that we get to a much more level and equitable place together. Next, please. And of course, the other part of that is now national adaptation plans, which is recognizing that a lot of climate change is already baked into the system, and we need to invest and have the same kinds of targets and frameworks to adapt to existing climate damage and to recognize the amount of loss that we're going to appear. So neither of these two frameworks, national adaptation plans nor nationally determined contributions, currently recognize culture. There is the odd mention of heritage here and there, but there is no mention of culture. And this is really damaging, but it is also an incredible opportunity for us at the first very early stages of the development of a new set of national commitments to climate, that we start to really work hard to get culture embedded in all dimensions of national commitments. Next, please. And of course, the COP presidency have really noticed this. It's a very interesting presidency. I've been to many, many COPs, and I've never experienced such an open presidency. Culture in Brazil is of a different order altogether, certainly to culture in the UK. It is deeply embedded in the fabric of everything that everybody thinks and does. It's extraordinarily rich, and it is very closely attached to identity and to community. And the presidency has recognized that we need something different. So the first thing that they've done is to create something, a set of frameworks that will enable people to experience climate differently. And that's the difficulties of climate, but also the possibilities of action on climate. Next, please, Imogen. So we thought we'd pull together a quick chronology of climate talks to see where we are. So these started, for many of you will know this, in 1992. The UN started to talk about climate talks, and then delightfully, the Rio Earth Summit taking place in Brazil kicked off the formal approach to climate talks on the UNFCCC, the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. And since that time, we've had a conference of the parties, a climate summit every single year. Now, culture has been barely present. The first real moment of culture was for COP21 in 2015 with the Paris Climate Agreement, where we started to see culture organizing itself around the COPs in a different way internationally, and where artists and cultural leaders started to take a much more visible role. There's never been a COP where we haven't had culture, but this is where it really started to organize itself. Then the next really significant series of COPs started off with COP26 in the UK, which kept alive the commitment to the Paris Climate Agreement, then followed by the COP in Egypt, COP27, which recognized the concept of loss and damage, which had been on the COP agenda since COP1, being brought there by small island nations, particularly Pacific small island nations, who had been saying we must recognize loss, the loss of our lands, of the very land we stand on, and we must also compensate for that loss and the damage that we're experiencing. And finally, COP27, 27 years later, loss and damage was recognized. The other thing, though, so was culture. So for the very first time, we found that cultural heritage as a concept was recognised within the loss and damage framework, and this is really exciting to us. We also did a lot of cultural organising in Egypt, in Sharm el Sheikh, around that. At COP28, we had the adoption of a much stronger commitment to adaptation, and we had a commitment to transition away from fossil fuels. And then COP29 in Azerbaijan, that was very poor as a COP. It was very, very disappointing, but there was more money put into it. Can you go on to the next one, please? In the meantime, Julie's Bicycle, with partners, the International Federation of Arts Councils and British Council, did some work on where cultural policy sat in relation to climate. And the shorthand is, it pretty much wasn't there. So we produced 2 publications to say, let's start to build culture into climate policy and climate into cultural policy. Next, please. And we also started to bring in, with many partners, so this is not just Julie's Bicycle, this is fantastic partners. You're looking at Sonia Guadalajara on the right there, who is the Minister for Indigenous Affairs in Brazil. We took over a museum, we put on a series of events and talks and parties, and it was just really good fun at COP27 to say culture is how we move ourselves into a different space. And we had people from all over the world coming to that event. And we also, that was the event where we launched the very first ministerial. There were only 4 ministers who came, but the very first ministerial with ministers of culture saying, actually, you know what, culture and climate need to work together. Next, please, Imogen. The following year, this group of ministers had massively expanded and formed themselves as a group called the Group of Friends of Culture-Based Climate Action. We actually started with perhaps 20 ministers, but it very quickly has increased. It is now well over 50. And it was chaired by the COP host, the UAE, but also the Minister of Brazil, Culture Minister for Brazil, Margarete Menezes. And that was a really big landmark moment, because all of these culture ministers were saying, actually, we need to take action, and we need to support our cultural and creative communities to take action on climate through policy. Next, please. So between COP28 and COP30, there was this COP29, which was very disappointing. But just before COP29, at the meeting of the G20, Margarete Menezes hosted the very first ever ministerially led Culture Climate Summit. It was so exciting. She brought with her 2 other ministers, the Minister for Indigenous Affairs, Sonia Guadalajara, and also the Minister for Climate Change, somebody called Marina Silva, who has been very, very important this year in the development of COP. And that was 3 days of, again, a deep dive into what culture-based solutions to climate are. Where are they? Where are they happening? What more do we need to do to support them? And that became part of the G20 negotiations. And the most ambitious G20 statement came out of that, led by the culture ministers, about the importance of valorizing cultural practice, cultural knowledge, cultural communities into policy. So that was, although COP29 was very disappointing, it was framed by this fantastic event. And actually, Margarete Menezes is organizing another one just before COP in Rio de Janeiro. Thanks, Imogen. And of course, there's COP30, the world in the heart of the Amazon. Next one, please. So the new president, the Ambassador Andre, has recognized that culture has been profoundly neglected, has given us these 2 beautiful quotes: to our thinkers, spiritual leaders, artists, philosophers, we call on you to help us transcend outdated mindsets whilst preserving shared values and innovating towards a new planetary renaissance. Humankind must regenerate its relationship with itself and with the nature it belongs to. Wow, that from a COP president. That was extraordinary. That was the very first public statement he made as president. And he also said 2025 must be the year we channel our sadness and indignation towards collective action, a global Mutira. We must channel our sadness and indignation. How do we do that? We do that through our spiritual traditions and through our creative, cultural and artistic traditions. These are the tools for channeling and stewarding the pain that we all feel about our dying planet, and how we turn that into something that is regenerative and full of hope and dignity. He's also brought in this idea of a Mutira. This isn't the first time that civil society has been invited into COPs. What's at the heart of it? Next one, please, Imogen. What's at the heart of it is this central idea. We had Tullio Andrade, who is the Chief Alignment and Strategy Officer in London, about a month ago, who actually said to us, the COP presidency, think that the cultural sector and the arts are at the core of the solution. So for anybody, and I'm sure there are many of you in this call who have been doing and been participating in this work, I literally nearly fell off my chair when Tullio said this, because all of us have been working so hard to even get a little mention of culture in the context of COP presidencies and the UN climate change negotiations and so on. And suddenly here we have this extraordinary statement from Tullio, who said to me that he's only just, it's only since sort of April, May that they've realized that they're missing the big treasure trove of climate solutions and of climate values that, of course, defines culture. So there is a really different feel this year. Next, please, Imogen. And it's in this context that Julie's Bicycle is sort of gathering together with this fantastic global community, a group of people who've been doing this work for many years. And we're launching, as we speak, a big campaign called We Make Tomorrow. With very deliberate words, we, as in us, cultural heritage, arts, creative industries, we make minds up, we make values real, and of course we make the material and the conceptual world around us. And we do that now. We don't do it in 2 weeks' time or in 6 months' time. We are literally today making what happens tomorrow. So we've launched this campaign to really meet this moment, and I'd really welcome all of you to be curious about it, to come and join us. Next, please, Imogen. It's called We Make Tomorrow, Let's Create the World We Long For, Culture at the Heart of Climate Action. And it's a global campaign bringing together artists and artivists, creative designers, culture and heritage keepers who are already united. We're asking governments and policymakers to put culture at the heart of their thinking. Actually, what that really means is we want them to embed culture completely, fully, comprehensively, generously into the next global stocktake. And that starts now. It starts with the cultural community globally showing up, saying we're here, we're ready to help. We've got some really amazing answers for you. We connect people, we're doing the work. We're saying we need your support. We need the support of policymakers. We need you to help us to understand and navigate the language of climate. We need those enabling factors of policy, including funding, to do our work really well. We need the sense making of policy frameworks, the areas that we can focus on, the areas that we can dialogue together, and all of these are the role of really good ground-led, iterative policy. But the project has been included as part of the presidency's Global Mutira. Next, please, Imogen. I'm going to hurry up. 3 parts. We've got a global call. We're sharing stories and evidence, and we've got a big festival of culture. But the bits that matter now are the global call. We want to take, well, actually, we've got more like 70,000 voices already, asking climate leaders to be bold and brave. And we've got a little map at the back of the microsite for you to tell your story. Next, please. Because culture, this is why we need culture. We need culture to be the transformative force that it is at the moment not. Next, please, Imogen. So that's the global call. I'm going to stop now because we're already over time. I would love you to join it. We need all these voices to say we're here to help, to connect as a global community. We've got champions all over the world. We'd love to have voices from Finland to join it, because we're already doing the work, but we need much more strength and much more support and much more recognition if we're going to do that really big job of transforming the way we feel about climate change and therefore how we act on it. Thank you very much. Should we